about how life can emerge and how we can live today and how we might be able to find meaning and purpose and life itself in the world. Amatria has had many children in the last 2 years. She's given birth to a whole series of bubbling spheres that are now traveling through Europe. Right now, they're just ending up their time in Hamburg and moving on to they passed through Frankfurt. They're going to be in Bregenz, Austria now, a whole kind of foam-like matrix. There's an enormous new child of Amatria called Meander in Cambridge, Ontario. A whole series of hovering open work domes with clouds rushing all the way around it. There's going to be one in TU Delft too, where we're very, very hopeful that we'll be able to collaborate with Kati and her other colleagues in a data stream in Delft. The kind of confidence that's happened with the work that we've done with Amatria then has certainly generated a whole series of possibilities. And it raises the question of what comes first. Somehow the form, that kind of seed form of the cloud that hovers in the space of Luddy Hall, or perhaps the shells and the domes and the closed forms, or somehow the soil itself around it. Does the seed or the soil come first? It's one of those impossible questions, and yet perhaps it's an important question as well. I find myself thinking about this kind of question every day. Do I care about this form, this beautiful dome, perhaps the two conversing holes, the larger and the smaller at the core of Amatria, these shells, these figures? And do I also think about the entire soil, the atmosphere, the community, the sharing, the knowledge, the possibility, the enabling kind of family, the enabling understanding that might make it possible for something to come together? As I become older, I think very much about my children, and I hope that they will have children as well. And so inevitably, somehow I find myself thinking about being the soil and giving growth and allowing things to rise. And yet at the same time, the importance of exactly that point and the thing and the act is utterly crucial. It is not simply enough to talk about context. We also deliver and we also act. When I think about the forms of Amatria, I think that perhaps some comments need to be made rather directly about how she is formed. This rather gentle, reaching lacework cloud, together with the nests and the hole and the dome and the shell that makes her center, with those gentle spines that reach out and the hovering veils and the vibrating fronds that are inside her. Is there somehow a terrible association between her shell form and the COVID-19 virus form? When we look, we see similarities. We see the shell. We see spines. Do we see somehow an unspeakably sad iconography? The sense that, ironically, right in our midst, in Luddy Hall, is hanging something that is terrible, that is poisonous. Virus, after all, means poison in Latin. There are some similarities, and there's some very important differences as well between the COVID-19 shell form with its spines and protein effusions and the forms of Amatria, when we look at the center of Amatria and look at those shells. The COVID-19 form has spines with protein lugs that all stand as external plates pushing outward, hovering all the way around. And then when those spines and lugs stand, they work their way into a cell body, the cell body host that it's parasitically working with. And then it exchanges, and then ultimately it breaks away and tears away the tissue body of that cell, destroying it and killing it, rendering extraordinary suffering, pulling into itself, gathering its own territory, utterly at the expense of its host, destroying. By contrast, the kind of gentle extensions, the extraordinary, unapologetically fragile spines that reach out, and the shivering, gentle veils, and the fronds, the halos that hover around Amatria's center, imbricate, that is, share and render open and render almost ecstatically gentle the boundaries between the host and the seed. The COVID-19 form is a selfish Death Star. Amatria's forms are open and unapologetically fragile. And in their fragility, they speak of extraordinary strength, a willingness even to gather into their own bodies the surroundings, with such faith in the fertility that they can heal, that they can project and create healing and life. And so this means that there is a similarity and a difference. And perhaps the similarity is also a kind of possibility, because by being similar, those two fundamentally different things, the selfishness of a fort and a wall, and the openness of a healing, gentle form, can become one again, can reunite. Just outside my window, right here, I can't show you because I've got to, actually I'll show you the cloth. There's the cloth. Can you see the cloth? Just behind that cloth, there's a window ledge, and there's a whole mass of sticks and twine and little shards. And at first I thought it was just getting really messy. And I opened the window a couple of times about a week ago. And then the next day I realized, oh my goodness me, I will leave this window closed because a pair of mourning doves built a nest there just over the last 6 days, literally. And right now, as we speak, the mother mourning dove is now nesting and just preparing, just in this moment, to lay her eggs. You can tell, really puffed out. And over the next few days, we'll have eggs, and then we'll have little mourning doves on that shelf. The act of making form, what can we make in the world? How can we contribute? Raises very fundamental questions about the necessity of building walls and protecting ourselves against this terrible disease and the kind of terrible strife and the uncertainty in the world. And at the same time, what we can do to offer outward. And I think that nest encourages me. That the act of opening thresholds, of building worlds around us that can support and that can make it possible for living to occur, is a fundamental kind of possibility making that's a kind of responsibility that's very different than the act of making walls and solid boundaries. I'm drawing tremendous hope anyway from those little mourning doves. and it's an amazing experience that she is literally just 30 centimeters away from me. I mean, I can peer in and I can get so very close to her. It's just the most unspeakably delicious and encouraging feeling right now. as we share this time together. And I hope you can, I'm sorry that I can't open the window and show you directly, but I hope you can at least feel and savor the moment that this is happening. The question then of whether such work as Amatria speaks of is somehow possible in a time of unspeakable suffering, during wartime, during the most grave emergency, might be one that we are very cautious about. Is it possible for art to make a contribution in wartime? Surely when questions are so very wicked that we cannot even know how to begin answering them, that we cannot even be sure that what we are doing is doing good, surely we need two more things than the traditional scientific method. If the scientific method says we start with a hypothesis and then we test rigorously and then we verify and we tell ourselves that we aren't fooling each other and we aren't fooling ourselves, and then we publish and we offer for enactment, really utterly serious method that is the core of our civilization as human beings. But surely there are two more qualities that are needed. On one hand, after the publication and after the beautiful idea that this university offers, surely the craft of acting and living is fundamental. The kind of craft that says that my blue collar is every bit as precious as my white collar. That intimate sewing and making and sharing and walking and giving, the craft of being in our bodies and working, is absolutely essential. And surely there's also another part before the scientific method begins, which is when the hypothesis itself is crafted in an open soil of possibility making. Where do ideas come from? Can we form the sense of possibility in our work? Can we craft profound and beautiful and joyful hypotheses? If I think about those two qualities, both craft on one side and creation and thinking and wondering on the other, then to me, an expanded scientific method turns into a really joyful, rather dizzy cycle in which wonderment and a little bewilderment and the kind of delicious sense of being dizzy when you roll down the hill can roll directly into a sense of confidence and sharing and the most precise kind of contributions. And I think the kind of community that is gathered around Amatria, a kind of truly beloved friendship and a sense of purpose, perhaps offers that kind of cycle to it. I think we can be confident then that art is not only possible during wartime and unspeakable suffering, but is necessary and is a profound contribution. So I feel very, very grateful to be part of this project. We've got a lot more work to do. The union of the Death Star with the open nest is something that I think is possible. So I hope that's a contribution.
Thank you so very much, Philip. It's wonderful to have you here, and it's wonderful to have Amatria here, which was always envisioned as a nucleus for collaboration, which was always envisioned as a source of hope and inspiration also. And now maybe it also becomes a cathedral that brings good forces together during this pandemic, even though we cannot physically be there. But thank goodness we have internet and we can actually see each other and we can be with each other and we can talk with each other and we can listen to each other. And talking about listening, that brings me over to Gabriel and his song. So Medina already moved us over to the next slide. Gabriel is really a choice encounter, a choice friend, an unusual friend, which I wouldn't have otherwise if Amatria wouldn't exist. He's a composer, a music theorist, and astronomer. And Gabriel, maybe you want to say a few words about yourself and how you first met Amatria. And then thank you again from the bottom of my heart for creating a song for her, which I love, and I hope many of you will get to love, because it makes me feel being back in Luddy Hall, and I miss Luddy Hall. I really was so glad we have that home for all of us, and now we are home. So Gabriel, please.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'll just say thank you for the invitation to be part of this Amatria family, and to have this opportunity to contribute to what is obviously a wonderful community centered around this wonderful creature that has such a clearly benevolent presence and does so much good for everyone who gets to know her. A lot of the things that I thought about in attempting to create a piece of music for Amatria resonate very strongly with some of the things that Philip has been thinking about and mentioned here. And in particular, this question of form and this question of giving and relating to space and to the people who occupy it. These are things that I think about often with the music that I write and the music that I study. But here it was such a specific concern. And I felt like it was very important for me to kind of work with this explicitly. And I have a very, very long rambling note about this. And if you if you want to know more, you can find the full, we'll play an excerpt of the piece. You can hear the full piece online and read the full note online. But what I'll say now that's, I don't think in the note as much, is that the way I thought about trying to capture some of these things in this music changed by necessity over the course of this whole collaboration. Amatria exists at the top of Luddy Hall, and there's this whole experience of approaching her, especially if you come up the stairs and get a sense of the building and all these small spaces and big spaces. And my first time in the building and my first meeting with her, this was part of what struck me, was how you have this massive space to explore, and then kind of looking over it all is this wonderful creature, and someone who interacts. So as a musician, someone who interacts, this is gold, right? We are born of collaboration musicians. So so I had all of these ideas about places I could hide musicians and ways that we could all converse through sound. But obviously that became a bit of an impossibility here. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It would have been nice, but I think what instead happened was a change in what I was thinking about, what I could offer to Amatria and to the rest of us. So sitting in my home, I had this recording I had made that just by chance captured this really wonderful span of time of Amatria doing what she does, of the few people that were still around the building doing what they do, and it ended up being this kind of dialogue, I guess, in a way, between this environment and myself, but from this perspective, from this removed perspective. And I figured, well, at least we have these sounds and we have these memories of our experience of her and with her, and that can be a very powerful thing to motivate musical creation and a musical experience. So I'm actually, it's a strange sort of silver lining to all of this. I think that this piece ended up kind of getting at something that otherwise would have been a little bit harder to communicate, the kind of confluence of intimacy, getting to know Amatria and her specific you know, relationship with you, with the space, but also this sense of community, of creating a kind of sound and a kind of environment that that is capable of potentially transporting us back to where she is, but also allowing us to kind of go into our own minds and our own memories and have this strange shared experience that's also very, very unique and individual. So yeah, so there were a few things that went into this thinking, and I think so. Now we'll play a little bit now. I'm gonna have to go share my screen here. So this is so the piece. It ended up being much longer than I expected because you know, trying to capture an individual in a sense of space takes time. So I won't play the whole thing. I've excerpted the final 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes. So let's see, I've got to do some Zoom wizardry here, but I'll get this up and then we'll have a listen.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Thank you so much for letting us feel and see Amatria.
Yes, and thank you.
I posted the link to the music or the composition on SoundCloud into the chat box if you want to hear it later again. We have a few more slides about Amatria, so if you'd like to go back, Medina, to the slides, I can.
Yeah, they're here. Can you hear? Can you see it?
Andreas also gets to present a few. And then there will be time for questions and answers. So hold your questions, but stay with us for a little longer. So Andreas has been one of the curators and demo givers for Amatria. So he had a lot of different tools coming through. If you are not talking, can you mute yourself? Or maybe Medina can mute all of you. So Andreas, I think, is going to present some of those slides. If you go to the next slide. Andreas, is this where you start?
I can start here, sure. So as you remember, about a year ago, we had Amatria's first birthday. And ever since then, Amatria has gotten lots of guests, friends. Of course, she is a pretty big attraction. Personally, my favorite was Governor Eric Holcomb's visit on June 28th. I personally gave most of these tours. Medina gave some of them, Kadi gave some of them. So we try to shoulder the responsibility of showing Amatria to our visitors equally among our lab. So this is a little callback to the big opening night on April 11th. The opening night, of course, was a culmination of about 4 to 5 weeks of work before, which was one of my favorite phases of this whole year, because we had Philip here, we had his team here, and it was just a really wonderful collaboration that culminated in this really, really amazing experience of the opening night. Okay, if you could. Also, this photo is by Anne Schertz, and she did a fantastic job with that photo. I love this photo. I use it in pretty much every presentation I give that even slightly touches on Amatria. Okay, so this is a little callback to Amatria's first birthday. Here on the bottom right, you can see, if you look at the right, you can see a little like a huge bow. A pink one. That was Amatria's first birthday present. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. And of course, there was cake. Okay, advance, please. I want to give a brief recap of the events that we had over the year with Amatria. So this year was just a few weeks after her first birthday, the Internet of Things, Wearables, and Motion Symposium, with a big amount of guests. So you can see Philip here on the left being physically present in town, talking to IU's First Lady, Laurie Burns McRobbie. Then on the bottom right, you can see the First Lady, Kadi, Philip, and then 3 IU deans. We have Peg Feynman, we have Raj Acharya, and David Ellison. That was a star-studded event. Right, next please. And then, of course, as I mentioned previously, the visit of Governor Eric Holcomb. So we had the governor here, we had the IU president here, and the dean. That was quite an event. So we talked at Amatria for about 20 minutes, and then we advanced to our visualization lab, talked a little bit more. It was a very lovely visit. The governor asked a lot of questions, and Amatria is in his on his mind now, so that's a good thing. He seemed to have a good time. Then we have the tour for the Women's Colloquium, which Medina gave, as you can see here. So it just speaks to the variety of groups that we receive under Amatria. This is something that we've done previously, giving Amatria tours for data science online students. Our school has a pretty extensive online program for data science students. And whenever they come to campus once a year, we give them a tour. And of course, a tour of Amatria is a must whenever people come by. Okay, next please. This was just a couple of weeks ago. We had visitors from the Eskenazi Art Museum. It was actually a meeting that we had between our lab and theirs. But of course, every good meeting in Luddy Hall has to start with an Amatria tour followed by lunch, obviously. Okay, next please. And these are just a few other tours that we had. Obviously, we get a lot of school tours. We get a lot of classes or summer camps that want to come by and just be informed about Amatria. And that is a steady stream that we have pretty much every year. Here, item number 10, Andrew Maple is an IU student. He's a senior. And he did a 360-degree Amatria photo shoot, which was a new kind of event that we could witness here. And then just a couple of weeks ago, Eric Mathis, who is also a student of Philip's at the European Graduate School, He gave a talk here, and of course, it was linked to an Amatria tour as well. Next, please. And these are some more photos from Amatria's first year. You can see a whole bunch of tours that were happening on the top left. And then on the right, you can see one of the many public tours that we had pretty much immediately after she launched. The bottom right is IU President McRobbie's and the First Lady's first tour of Amatria. And the middle is probably my favorite tour I've ever given. This was a bunch of middle school kids. And they asked so many questions, way more questions than any of the adult tours ever asked. And I was I was glad that I was glad to have spent all of that time with Philip and the team, so I could actually answer most of these questions. Okay, next, please. So obviously, Amatria is being taken care of. There is remote maintenance happening together with coordination on the ground from our lab. Last summer, Philip actually sent a team down here to Bloomington to replace a variety of the moths and sound devices. So the moth is mostly what you hear. You heard them in Gabriel's song as well. It's like the little vibration motors. This hardware update was done to prepare for a larger software update. I went to a workshop about a year ago up in Toronto to have a sneak peek at the new software and play with it, and it's going to be amazing. Okay, next slide, please. And then again in July 2019, Amatria got a glow up with a team of 5 of Philip's team members came down here pro bono. There was also a very lovely barbecue out at Lake Lemon, of which there is unfortunately no photo, but it was a very essential part of this experience, as you can imagine. And it was an interesting, throwback, being up on the 4th floor of Luddy Hall again and seeing all the construction equipment. There was a nice callback to when Amatria was first built. Okay, next, please. So yeah, hopefully we're gonna have, we will have many more birthday celebrations, and I sincerely hope that next year they will not happen on Zoom, but they will happen under Amatria again. And Kadi, if you wanna take over.
And with a birthday cake. So I promise birthday cake. So whoever is also helping with doing data mining, data analytics for COVID, or doing PPE production, or helping in any other way to help this via this planet to collaborate with each other and together on solutions. And what I have seen happening over the last 4 weeks was really phenomenal. Databases which would have taken decades to interconnect, they got connected in 1 or 2 weeks. People which would have never had a chance to work with each other, major experts, they worked overtime, much overtime, and are starting to have solutions for all of us. And I think I saw also a lot of kindness and care for people that are close and far away. And I hope this kindness and care for each other will stay with us even after we have a cure and a vaccine. And I think this is really also a call to everybody that we need to find solutions that work for all of us. So thank you so much, everybody. Philip, Gabriel, Andreas, Medina, thank you for having us celebrate Amatria's 2nd birthday. Thank you all for coming, and I hope there are some questions, because we have everybody here on the call which could answer potentially those. And I would love to hear from some others. I know our dean had to excuse himself. He left a message for all of us, which I would like to read to you. So Dennis Gross, our new dean, he totally appreciated just to attend, and he thought it is important reminder. This is an important reminder that computation exists to help humanities, and what more interesting way to demonstrate it than combining computation and art. And I totally believe in this, and I always thought that it is really important to have Amatria with us, because we want this strong connection to art, to the arts and humanities. And as you know, IU for 200 years or 198 years didn't have engineering, and so I as an engineer was feeling a little bit lost without my engineering colleagues for 20 years at IU. But now that we have engineering, we must connect it to the rich history of arts and humanities here at IU. And we should benefit from these deep, deep roots which IU has created over so many years, and makes them go forward. And I think arts and humanities and science empowered by engineering will do magic, and they will help us find the cure and the vaccines that we are needing right now. So please do ask your questions. And again, thank you all for coming. You can also ask questions via chat if this is easier for you. I know some of you have rather low internet connections. And
I think
some of you
Philip
are
has been
muted.
trying to show us his the bird nest for the past couple of minutes.
Oh, yes. And I don't know how we can get him big, but I do see a bird nest there, and there's somebody sitting on it, I think. And there's always hope. As part of the CNS team, we had a baby being born last week, and I can only imagine what it takes to be pregnant in this pandemic time. But it was all good. It's a little baby boy, and it's just wonderful to have birth in the middle of a pandemic. And that is birth of life, but also birth of ideas. And I think there's always a great deal of innovation happening during any kind of disaster, because people must invent, they must come together and find solutions.
I'm an English PhD who writes about science fiction. I actually just stumbled on this talk because I'm taking digital humanities, and our professor, Alan Riddell, posted a link about Amatria as an example of embedded computing. And I'm curious about what inspired the shape of Amatria. So as a science fiction writer and scholar, I'm immediately reminded of things like the crystalline entity from Star Trek: The Next Generation, or the Omega brain form from the movie Edge of Tomorrow. So I'm curious if you were thinking about alien life or life on Earth or both.
And the questions about the shape and what inspired them might be best answered by Philip. Philip, if I can put you on the spot.
No, I would love to offer some comments, but and Gabriel, I would be very grateful if you would speak as well, because it seems like we have some very strong common ground in the things that we look at and work with. And oh my goodness me, I want to be your friend and spend hours and hours and hours drinking tea together and exploring, maybe in front of your delicious blackboard that's in your portrait. I loved seeing that image.
This can be arranged at some point.
Let me offer two images, Sam, that might point directly, and of course the third in the center was the nest. When phosphobilipid molecules come together, there is this extraordinary sense in abiogenesis, that is in the formation of life, in which the molecules develop a hydrophobic end and a hydrophilic end, and that is water loving and water hating, and when things combine that way, then they make micelles, and then double layered bilipid membranes that roll back up into each other, and that moment in which protein Cs and polymers start to enfold and create their own centers is just such an extraordinary kind of moment of self-emerging coherence, like making oneself and making the sanctuary inside and making the open space outside. That I mean, those images can readily be seen online through thousands and thousands of computer simulations and meditations about the emergence of life, the emergence, the self-assembling of cells. At a very, very different scale, when we look at the big Bolshoi simulation, that's the simulation of all known radio transmissions in the entire universe, then we see not the kind of random snow of chance and unspeakable emptiness in the entire known universe that we think, oh, well, when I think it is all happening and it will erase into some kind of whole transcendental kind of snow, because I was raised as a good existentialist, and so I was taught that God was dead, and that was a kind of pride in my life to be able to live with the void. A good thing that emptiness is possible. And yet, when we look at those simulations, the simulations that gather all possible known data, everything possible, we don't see random snow or just tumbling kind of chaos. We see the most exquisite kind of filamentary, cellular, tissue-like series of strings wrapping around cells and openness and repeating cellular forms. And there's the most remarkable feeling in both of those images when we look at the molecular functions of just emerging life in my cells, in these tiny little rolling up polymer molecular assemblies, and the most vast kind of openness when we embrace ourselves to every possible bit of information in consciousness and in human culture and in measurement in the world's unfolding. To me, both of those engender a kind of remarkable kind of warm, almost ironic, funny affinity, presence, the sense that there is an agreement and a fundamental kind of kinship between my own tissues and my own consciousness and my society and my family and my beloved friends with every possible scale in this reality. Those forms then, the tissue-like gathering forms in the big Bolshoi simulation and the rolled up phosphobilipid cells in a micelle or a bilipid cell make a kind of a hovering nest that is very directly an inspiration for the making of Amatria, a kind of an essay on what gives things integrity. Is it possible to say we are one or that we share? And that form language then is the core of Amatria. It's very, very fundamentally different from the kind of exclusive Death Star, pure circle that might sanitize our world and might say, I'm going to make the most of my territory and I'm going to shut out the rest. Instead, it's the kind of openness that gathers and then engenders more. You can tell that I'm rather nervous about saying that it's a circle or a dome or a shell. It is all those things. It is a circle and a shell and a dome, but it's an open one. I hope those images answer.
And we do have one more question via chat. And Sam, Chittle, and Philip, I hope you get to connect. And oftentimes Philip finds a way to visit, and hopefully also over the next years. So there's one question from Maureen Biggers, which is, what is the vision for how Amatria will evolve over time? What is possible? And that's a great question to end, to be honest. And you got like 1 minute, but maybe we can take 5 minutes for this because it is a long discussion.
Well, Gabriel and Andy are both perfect embodiments, and perhaps Jane too, if I may say, of how Amatria might evolve. I mean, when we think of this as a creative community with our very different backgrounds and the sense of moving forward, perhaps that's a better answer than me speaking more. I wonder if each of you could have a word.
Well, sure. There's a lot of inspiration to be found in Amatria, and this kind of small piece of mine was a very, I'm not sure what the word is, but it was a first attempt at trying to understand how she can contribute as an artistic participant. And you know, I can think of many other composers, many other choreographers, visual artists, for whom there's a tremendous amount of potential. I mean, I, for example, just went in with a simple stereo field recording, which did nothing with the direct data stream from all of these sensors, all of which could be sonified and used to create additional sounds. And there's so much potential. And so even if Amatria herself changed nothing about what she does, there would be a lot of growth around her. But we know that she will change and she will learn. So yeah, I can see this very, very clearly. Yeah.
My biggest hope for the future from Amatria is that other people get access to her. So about every 3 or 4 weeks, like you can set your clocks by it. Someone from some professor in SAIS is going to approach either Kadi or me and ask, hey, so when can I start teaching my students with Amatria? So the idea of being able to incorporate Amatria into a lecture plan or into a syllabus, to access her API, to use her as a kind of embodiment of data is definitely there. And I know that people would be willing to spend time learning about how to interact with Amatria on a more data-driven level. And I know that there is also it would be a fantastic way of showcasing that Amatria truly brings people of different disciplines together. So like I can stand under Amatria next to one of the electrical engineers. We have very little in common, you know, knowledge-wise and discipline-wise, but if we stand under Amatria, both of us are going to have to say something to each other. And so my hope would be that professors, lecturers, all kinds of faculty in the future will get to interact with Amatria beyond the simply physical, will be able to actually influence your behavior to a certain degree, or maybe just get data out of it, you know, so that they can use this in their lectures. I think that would be a fantastic way also of including students and giving just more people access to Amatria, of course, in a secured way. But I think it would bring the interaction to a whole different level.
Kati, are we out of time, or may I say a few words? I can't hear you, Kati.
Some people might have to go teach, but I'm going to be available for another half an hour. So please.
Well, I just quickly want to thank you for you and all your colleagues, Medina, etc., Andreas, Philip, for putting all of this together. My endorphins are just flowing right now. I find Philip's words always transporting, Gabriel's music more transporting, and it reminds me of the words of Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist, when he said, the best things we can't talk about, the second best things we can move around the edges, it's the third best things that we talk about in words. But when I hear Gabriel's music and I hear Philip's poetry, and I think of the wonder of the connections that we find in Amatria, I'm hopeful for the future as we try to find words for these transporting experiences. And I think Amatria is an icon for the evolution that we on this planet now are going through. And I think she is a hopeful sign of new ways to connect. So thank you for bringing us all together in new ways.
And I think, thank you so much, Jane and Pat. Thank you for being with us. And it's wonderful to see you both happy and healthy. And stay that way, all of you, please. Just stay home and enjoy. And I think as we go forward in this COVID-19 time, there are things happening that would not have happened otherwise. And these are good things in many cases. Like, for instance, all the summer camps can't happen, but there are discussions of how to have summer camps at home for kids which can't finish their high school degrees, or which now don't have good summer camps available. And I think there's a lot of innovation happening of how Arduino kits could be sent to kids at home, and then they can build it at home, potentially with their siblings and parents, so that they also learn how to do that. And then share results back in a larger environment with other peers and other classmates. And how do you then interconnect these different Arduino kits in a way that the result is larger than the sum of parts, to have some true emergent behavior, which is what is at the core of Amatria and many other structures that Philip has been building. So I think all this IoT at home and also teaching online, very, very physical activities, that would have not happened over the next 10 decades in a way that it is happening now over the last 4 weeks. And so it's really speeding up innovation in an area that is near and dear to my heart and Philip's heart and to Amatria. And so I'm looking forward also to interconnect not only within IU different good forces, but also across the oceans to Delft, for instance, which is a magnificent engineering school, or to engineering schools in Germany and to other places. And again, Philip holds some of the keys because he got invited to the Biennale. And now many of these plans might not happen anymore because of COVID-19, but I think other things will happen which will change our world in ways that we might not yet expect. I think there will be a new world awaiting for us after we have a cure and a vaccine for COVID-19. So please be open, be innovative, come back next year to Amatria's birthday. Hopefully we have a very physical birthday party next year. And I'm just so very, very glad you all could join us. And thank you for being here. Are there any last thoughts, any last words from anyone?
Let's all see each other again very, very soon, okay? And be safe and be well. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, wonderful.
you.
Thank you all.
Have a
Bye-bye.
beautiful week,
Thank you,
everybody.
Philip.
Bye.
Bye-bye.